So I'm watching Christians and conservatives bicker about Charlie Kirk and MAGA. They're online, they're on Facebook, they're on all the social media, arguing about, I guess, the people who were against Charlie Kirk or some of the things that he espoused. And everyone's going back and forth like we've been taught to do for decades. But I'm also watching the same parents on both sides send their kids to be formed by the very worldview that they seem to oppose. Isn't it interesting? On one end, you have MAGA folks complaining about the school system and all the problems with it. And it's Monday, his funeral was on Sunday. And then on the other end, you have especially black evangelicals who typically support the Democratic Party doing the same complaining about what's taught in the government schools, and they oppose it in the system. But yet both sides are giving their kids over to the system. Today is not about Charlie Kirk. Today is about your child's formation. What's going on, everybody? It is Dev of the Iron Father, and one of the things I have not talked about overtly has been my history with homeschooling my kids. But today, I think it's about time for me to go into this topic, and really, this is a part of the Iron Father protocol. So I am doing this video, and of course, again, I'm always trying to reach men. We're looking at men who may be going through a divorce, may just be having some sufferings in their marriage, or maybe they're trying to rebuild post-divorce. But today is about homeschooling, because I know there are men in all of those categories that I just named as well who wish they could homeschool their kids, who now you may actually have the opportunity to do so if you are divorced from your ex-wife and now the kids are at your house. Or maybe it's just the fact that this is something that is about you now stepping into that leadership responsibility of your home. A lot of you guys may be in the case where, hey, I'm going to stick it out in my marriage. My wife and I, we love each other. Maybe we have some trouble, who knows? But part of you becoming a new man is taking over that role of a leader inside your home. I'm going to argue that one of the most effective things that you can do as a leader in your home is to teach your own children. Now, it was Malcolm X made a classic, really, statement that is at least attributed to him that was something to the effect that only a fool would allow the oppressor to educate his children. I think for a lot of people, and again, black folks, I'm not trying to ruffle you because I don't know if you check, but you know, I am a black man. So I'm going to touch on some of the challenges that we have when it comes to homeschooling, even more so than anyone else. But in this particular video, with me talking about homeschooling, with me talking about the government school system, and with me talking really about just educating your own kids, this goes for a man and for a woman. But dads, I am going straight at you because I think this is mainly your responsibility and you have to lead this effort. I've heard and I've known too many stories of men that pass that on to their wives for their wives to do. Now, my ex-wife taught the kids up until they were able to read. Once they were able to read, then that's when I took over their education system. Understand, that meant I worked, I kept making more money in my profession, and at the same time, 4 kids were coming up. And then and I'll say by the time we got up until now, 10 years ago, I ended up taking over the homeschooling portion full time. One was now moving on to, really, he was already in college at 15 years old. So he was pretty much on his own. The only thing I think I was really trying to push him now doing was the Black Business School. Otherwise, he was now pretty much self-taught and now, I'll say self-led, and now in the college environment himself. And he started that back in our previous state. My other 3 kids, I now took them on. And that means the results I had, and I'm going to say we had, because it was still an effort just up until those later years, ended up having all 4 kids were able to start college at 16 years old. 2 of them ended up getting their bachelor's degrees by 20 years old. One is now thinking about going back to school. That's my youngest daughter. And, you know, right now she was going to get her associates. And my youngest son just said, you know, I think I want to go ahead and I want to now kind of get more into the manual labor. And that's perfect for him because I expressed to all of my kids, you don't need to go to college in order to be success. That's not how we measure champions around here. And actually, knowing what I know now as a person who's been corporate downsized, I think that is validated even more that you want to get into some skills that are going to protect you from the upcoming AI onslaught. And so I'm proud of the decision that he made. And if he chooses to go back to school, then great. But I know the geniuses that my little superstars are. And as a father, you just do not know how, look, no matter how things turned out with the family, and if I died today, it's still the fact knowing that everything that was in my head, I had a chance to place down in theirs. And while I could say, hey, it wasn't much in mine, I can still say, and I'm saying this to you dads, that whatever your experiences in your life have been, you can now put that into your child's mind. You can now put that into your child's life. So for you conservative and MAGA types, why are you still looking for another savior? Why are all of you seemingly still looking for the next incarnation of Jesus Christ to come and now come up to you in your household and go, follow me and I'll make your children fishers of men? Every single day, you send your kids out to a government school, but then you go ahead and you become keyboard warriors on all the things that you hate. Out in this country is this, and these people are this, and those liberals are this, and those conservatives are this. Bang, 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 bang. But yet, you probably have no idea. Many of you, I hope some of you do, but many of you probably have no idea what your kids are even learning when they go to school. And of course, the same thing goes on the so-called liberal side. Now, understand, this is a politically agnostic channel. I could care less about either side. I lean toward libertarian if I had to make a choice. If you wanted to put a label on this bald head, that's what it would be. But at that same time, I noticed that even my liberal dads out there, and moms, again, this is for you too. You can get some of this work. But what I'm saying is, regardless of what your political persuasion may be, we are all led by our social media that's getting us riled up. And the Charlie Kirk assassination is yet one more, and it's going to continue going on, because if you understand how this world gets down, then you'll understand this is not the end. So I'm going to tell you how I designed my homeschool. This is going to be a continuing series, and definitely let me know in the comments below if you want me to do more on homeschooling your kids, how to get it going, what worked for me, what I would do all over again. It's the only job I've had a chance to retire from. It's the only job that couldn't downsize me. It's the only job that actually is, well, that's my retirement. I know a lot of you off the rip are saying, well, I couldn't do that. Well, started doing it making $29,000 a year. Really, I'm going to say 5 kids because I was still paying for my oldest son, paying to the court system for him. Then it was down to 4 by the time we got to 2008. And at that time, I was making $45,000 a year with 4 kids. My wife at that time just had a series of mommy jobs, just doing something to pay the bills. And hey, when you're struggling, scratching and surviving, like good times, that even helped. But overall, it wasn't easy. So I'm going to pull your whole money excuse off the table right off the rip. Number 2, my blog started out as Cornerstone Dad. And so I did talk about a lot of those adventures. And again, definitely let me know if you want me to go into those. But I thought today it was pretty timely, on the heels of certainly the tragic event that happened at a university campus. Charlie Kirk, many being honored in my very home state. It was a packed stadium of people remembering him. And I just really wondered, so Monday morning, everybody sends their kids right back off to the school. And you know what? A school that I could walk to right now, and if I started walking, hit my mailbox, a school very close to my home. I just looked and saw 1 hour ago that it was on lockdown today. My homeschool has never been on lockdown. Matter of fact, it's always the opposite of lockdown, because if there was going to be some discipline was going out there and cut that grass, especially that old house that we lived in before I moved out here to the desert, where I had all this land. That was discipline. You get on out there and shovel that snow. So if anything, the door was unlocked. There was no lockdown. And for you, good Republican folks, yeah, one of the things that we even had to do is, father had to take the tribe on out to the range, because we didn't worry about someone coming in with a weapon. When it was needed in my home, I wanted my kids to be prepared on how to use the weapon if somebody was coming in. See, those are the advantages that even you 2A guys out there, you don't have to outsource the protection of your family. And while I'm certainly no expert, not at all, compared to a lot of you out there, but you notice the difference in mentality. It was up to me to teach my kids how to protect themselves, how to learn about education. I couldn't outsource it to someone else because in my learning environment, my kids felt safe inside my home. Do yours feel safe wherever they are at on the day that you're watching this video? Or are you steady checking your phone, kind of wondering like, well, when is that alert gonna come in? When is it gonna go in? So let's get into this topic today, because I'm not going to say it's hypocrisy on both sides. I'm just going to say if you so upset and riled up over Charlie Kirk, then what are you doing in teaching with your own kids? Because both parties, both of you that get all get your panties in a bunch over the political conversation, to me, your argument is null and void if you send your kids to the very government schools that you complain about and that you get on social media and that you attack people over. But now let's go ahead and fly down a little lower and get more into it. First, let me tell you, I'm not anti-teacher, but I'm saying you are the teacher. Again, I'm talking to you dads out there, moms, if this applies to you, then great. But dad, you are the teacher. You are the primary teacher in the home. So before, again, people get upset thinking that I'm against the school system, I am not at all. But when I say I'm not against it, that doesn't mean I want to send my children there. Obviously, homeschooling when I was coming up in the 70s and 80s, it was only a handful of people doing it. But by the time we end up moving now, I always call the homeschooling surge was really kind of what went through the private school, the Catholic Christian schools that came about really in the 80s and the 90s that many parents started sending their kids to in order to get them out of the government-controlled public schools. And now when you look at the liberties, you look at some of the vouchers that some states are making available. I know Arizona has one now, voucher, where they begin to reimburse some parents that they can use it for their kids' education system. We may talk about that a little bit more later and some of the problems that can come with that. But there are plenty of opportunities. And guess what? You can do it with the internet. You can even do it something I couldn't do even with AI tools today. You can do it. But yet, why don't you? Why don't you think about doing it? So let's go ahead and look at some options for those of you who may even want to consider this and think about it. First, we have, and I'm going to again talk directly to fathers, but if you are leading your home, if you truly say, hey, I can't do this, man, I'm not a solopreneur, I'm not, entrepreneur, I don't have the time, I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, I can't. But if you do if you have a spouse in the home that can do it, let's look at those options, and then let's look at some options of some dads that may not have anyone there. First, we're going to start out with the public and your personal overlay. This really, when people said, I homeschooled my kids during COVID, most of you did not homeschool your kids during COVID. What you did was you did the government's curriculum at your home during COVID. So there's a difference. Just like you worked from home, you did government schoolwork from home. You did schoolwork from home, but you weren't solo. You weren't on your own. That's totally different than someone who truly, my business is at home. They do not have to report to a headquarters in any particular location. They truly run their life, run their business, run everything at their home. That's what a true, by definition, homeschooling parent does. Just because you had your kids because the government said, hey, get those kids out of here, we're worried about them catching this virus, that doesn't mean that you are a homeschooling parent. Believe that. And I do understand when a lot of homeschooling parents get upset when they hear the comparison being made. And I've heard this quite a bit when people say, oh, I homeschooled my kids. No, you really didn't. Your kids were at home and they were using a curriculum that was given by the school and they just said, do the work there. And that's okay. And that may be where you have to start now. Why? Because I know a lot of you dads probably have no idea what your kids are doing in school. If you have elementary school age kids, if you have some high school age kids, do you even know what they're working on? Do you even know what they're learning? Do you even know what their dreams, goals, and aspirations are? Do you have a clue? Or are you so caught up in what you have going on at work? Look, I'm sorry, dads. I'm gonna have to go at you hard on this one. A lot of you dads probably know more about your kids' rushing average on football. A lot of you dads probably know more about how fast he is in the 40 or she is in the 40, and how high she can jump in volleyball. You know all of those things, and great. I'm glad you at least know that, because that shows that you have an active role in your kid's life. But you do know that sports, odds are, that's not going to be the thing that's going to get them there. A lot of you dads, I've been on the baseball and football fields more times than I can remember, trust me, including track as well. And I can tell you, a lot of you dads still kind of live your own NFL or hoop dreams, because you look at your kids and you're like, that's what I want to be. And one day they're going to make it big. Well, odds are they are not. They are not. So, what do you know about their education system? And you may even know a little bit about the football coach or the basketball coach, but do you know the teachers at the school the same way? Remember, in one of the videos, we actually talked about in our roundtable discussion that one of the biggest reasons why men end up losing custody cases when they try to go to family court or they're going through a divorce, why? Because the wife can go up there and say, my child goes to this school, there's this teacher, we have parent teachers conferences here, and their grades are that. Judge, referee looks over to the father and say, oh, well, you want to have 50-50 custody, or maybe you're here for full custody, or maybe you want custodial, you want to be the custodial parent. So what can you tell me about their school, and what does your kid have going on? Well, I know they're good in art. Um, they're a great athlete. Yeah. So dad, if that's you, we need to step that up. We need to step that up. And so if you do look at it and say, I do have some problems with the government school system, I think I can do better, then start here. First of all, get to where you at least know what's going on. This is vital, because how are you going to know as a homeschooling dad if you don't even know where your kids are at? So that's where I want you to start at first. For a lot of you, that may actually mean helping out the mother. You may have to work with her and not leave the burden all on her to do it. Been there and done that. One of the hardest things is to go to work and then come home and have to check papers. Now, here's what's kind of funny about my kids. They used to look at me, and I'm like any other teacher. I had a stack of papers and everything, and I got 4 journals that I have to go through, and I'm like, hey, y'all, write me that essay, and I'm like, oh, I'm tired. And especially, I could say when I was really working from home full time, the kids would know I would leave from up here. I would walk downstairs, and I had to give them, here it is time for me to give them a lesson. And I had my green tea, and green tea makes me go to sleep. That's even worse. I'm thinking it's going to give me a little pick me up. Oh, that brought me down. And I'm trying to teach them, and I'm fighting to stay awake. That's how exhausting it can be, especially when you're giving all that you can to a 9 to 5, and now you still have to bring it in order to educate them. And they're looking like, well, Dad, you said you were going to grade that paper. Now, the reason why I laughed, what's funny, is because I said, well, don't worry, when y'all get to college, you're going to realize real quick, these professors aren't grading jack squat. Trust me. You think I take a long time to grade the papers, I'm still better than them. Yeah, they found out pretty quickly. Matter of fact, they found out it was even worse. They would even take a test and everything else. And on one end, they're like, well, it's time for our next test. And the teacher said that our final was going to be based on how we performed on the other test, but they never gave us the other test back. There you go. Your dad wasn't that bad after all. But those are some of the pressures that we often deal with as that homeschooling dad. And dad, that's going to be a tough one for you. And right now, if you have that burden all on the mom, you need to take some of that off. This is going to be a way for you to now, even if it's just understanding the homework that your kids are working on from school, start there. Let that be the beginning for you. The next one is going to be kind of a hybrid model. And with this hybrid model, I want you to think, okay, my kids go to school a couple days a week. Or maybe you just start beginning to do what you can when they are at home. For instance, I know there are some states or maybe even counties where I live, for one, where the kids come home on a half day on Wednesdays. Then why can't that be the day you start with? I know you come home, but you're about to do some work now. This is our time to do work. Maybe that's your review time. It just starts with one day. And then maybe you can extrapolate that to a little bit more. Now, I know this is going to be grade dependent. This may be a lot easier to pull off on elementary school children. Gets a little harder when you start looking at some of the upper grades, but it can be done. It can even be done with some of your high schoolers. But you have to find the days and the times that you can get in there. And in some cases, depending on the district you're in, look, you're not going to be able to pull your kids out of school half the week. I get that. That's just not going to happen. Great if you do live in an area where that can happen. That'd be nice. But my point, even in this hybrid model, who says the school day has to end because they say that it ends? One of the biggest shams that I laugh about is that people think, oh, if you're homeschooling, the kids have to do work for 9 straight hours a day. Y'all know every single one of us probably watching this video have been in traditional school. You know doggone well you are not learning something 8 hours a day. Matter of fact, in many of the classes, if they happen to be 45 minutes long, 15 minutes of that, especially depending on the type of school you're in, what grade you're in, is the teacher bamming on the desk telling everyone to be quiet. Now, if you back in, y'all know how it is back in my day, you had to kind of stand somewhere, if you were in those Catholic schools, with your arms out for a while. Now, I wasn't one of those kids that got in trouble, thankfully, because that's, my father kind of believed in, spare the rod, spoiled child. But anyway, certainly by the time I ended up being third grade, I didn't get into any trouble in school at all. But I remember those teachers that had pointers and they came over there, whop, 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 whop. And even the school that I was in, a Detroit school, private school at that, when I was in middle school, was run more like a prison than it was a school. And my homeschool definitely did not run anything like that. So you can find ways that you can get in there and do it better than what they are doing. And I want you to find those ways. The day does not have to end when they come home. The day can continue. I don't understand why, and I mean, obviously I do when we look at it from a standpoint of, they say they don't want kids, especially in areas such as math, they don't want them to forget. They learn how to do a formula, they learn how to figure out some equations in school, so they send them home with homework. I get that a bit. But in most subjects, let's be honest, schools used to give a whole lot of homework, especially when we were growing up, because they bragged about that, almost like back in the day with football, before the death of Corey Stringer, they bragged about that like they used to do in football. Well, we work them out 2 a days in the Arizona sun in 115-degree weather. We make tough football players. You don't give them water? No, we don't give them any water because we want them to be tough. And then, he ended up passing out and passing away. And then all of a sudden, the NFL came with rules. And a lot of schools used to be like that. We give our kids 5 hours of homework every single night they leave. So your kids are under the government's authority for 5 hours after school. They get out of school at 4 and then they up until 8, 9 o'clock at night. That's my time. That's my time. That's not your school. And I know they'll say, well, that's because the kids may not get into school. And maybe things have changed. Because my kids haven't been in school really since 2008. I know what college was like for them, though. And I don't know how much this changed. Because I still hear kids saying, I got to do homework tonight. I got a lot of homework to do. So that hybrid model, if you can pull your kids away from that, or even just start doing the homework with them and you learn about what they're learning about, that is a start of you being actively involved in their schooling. And then you say, I know this is what they taught you. And again, this is for my MAGA folks out there, or this is for my liberal folks out there. I know what they taught you, but this is what I'm teaching you in my home. So as my parents told me when it came to the battles of evolution and creation, you put whatever you need to put on that test. But here's what we think is true. And I said the same thing to my kids when they went to college. As a matter of fact, I had the pleasure, should have brought that book in, the pleasure of teaching my kids one subject called the art of argument. So when we had a debate, they could debate both sides, whether we're talking about Christian topics, whether we're talking about politics, whether we're talking about sports. We can debate both, because that way you have a possibility of understanding both sides of the argument. Therefore, it's no need to necessarily be a keyboard jockey arguing back and forth about things. Or sometimes we can at least come to a bit of a compromise because you understand how the other side feels. So if you can even make a good argument, and I'll give that, Charlie Kirk was a very good debater. He could do that very well. Those are some things you can teach your kids. But do you even know where they're at to be able to start with that? But those are the great things you can do if you just find out where they're at. Now, for some of you, you might be ready to graduate to full homeschooling. Probably a few times a year, I get calls from parents. And this is why I always wanted this to be something, a part of Iron Father. And that is homeschooling completely. It's quite a commitment. As I said, I had a job paying me, $45,000 with 4 kids, and it was not easy. I had to travel for work, had to go out back and forth out of the country. There were some times I wanted more help, but my ex viewed it as, well, you're the one that likes school. I don't really like it. So, she didn't feel comfortable doing some things, and it was what it was. But there was no way I could just let the ball just get dropped with the kids. Yeah, there were times where the thought was, maybe send them to school, especially when they were younger and it was harder and money was tight. But as they got older, and as I started looking around out here, that decision to be a full-time homeschooling parent, I was in it. And just like anything else in life, I mean, heck, some of y'all in marriage, again, this is primarily a relationship channel. Just like you might look at that significant other, that spouse, and you wonder, is it all really going to be worth it? And when I looked at those kids and as they got older, I knew it was worth it. Maybe some of you are in the thick of that and you've already crossed over the full-time homeschooling parent route. And you're wondering, is it all going to be worth it? Maybe for you Christians out there, you're saying yes, because in the end, this is the great reward that I think I'm going to get. And I think that's definitely true. But maybe some of you also are wondering if again, if religion isn't your thing, maybe you're just wondering, is it going to be worth it because of the kind of life that I'm living with my kids? Especially, this is for my unschooling crowd out there, the ones that they do not do traditional homeschooling at home where they have a curriculum, etc. They are just saying, as I live life, my kids live life. And I think I was probably about a quarter unschooler as well, because my kids just went where I went. Everything I learned, they learned. They probably got tired of hearing about some things, but if we're talking about hip hop, I'm going through hip hop, I'm looking at good times. Another quick side note. Do you know one of the greatest classes I had an opportunity to teach was on Black sitcoms, a comparative analysis between Blackish and Good Times. Then we brought books looking at Hollywood, the creation of television, and how that is used in order to formulate and shape our minds. Do you know where else were they going to get that? No one else. The school was not going to give them that as it applied to our family, our history. That's the enrichment you get for you full-time homeschooling parents, if that's what you're thinking about. But I'm going to say, for you full-time homeschool parents, I applaud you. Don't get all caught up in the politics of things. We've been here before. I hope you think enough off the grid, if you will, that you look at this political landscape, you look at the let's get all upset and mad about everything, and you're able to pull your kids away from that. And we talk about socialization. I'm going to get more into that in a moment. Isn't it the greatest part about being a full-time homeschooling parent that you can not socialize with the muck that they may have to go through and learn in school, especially with a whole lot of drama and things you don't want them to know about? I'll tell you, it was a good thing. My daughter, I remember she went to community college, and some of the kids kind of made some comments. She didn't know anything about Jay-Z and Beyonce. Now, mind you, this was only less than 10 years ago. She didn't know anything about Jay-Z and Beyonce. And I said, that's okay. Let them tease you about that. But at the same time, how many of those kids that are talking to you like, oh, you don't know about Jay-Z and Beyonce and Lady Gaga? I guess she was hot at the time. I said, but how many of those kids can do a comparative analysis between the thoughts and the beliefs of Martin Luther King, between Malcolm X, between Booker T. Washington, and W.E.B. Du Bois? How many of them can break that down? And then, my kids ended up getting even prideful about music because, okay, they don't know who Lady Gaga is and wouldn't know a Jay-Z or Beyonce song if they heard it. but don't play some fat boys in front of them. Don't go ahead and put some old 80s on. Don't we played a game in the car on trips of basically it was like who made this sample. Well, I will play one track. It might be some oh, well, what could the example be? Oh, here's one. Should do I even say P Diddy's name nowadays on here? But we'll go ahead and play. Was it "Been Around the World" with Diddy and Mace, and then put some David Bowie "Let's Dance," and the kids make that connection. Oh, those are proud moments as a father. So those are the joys that you get from being that full-time homeschooling parent. Don't ignore them. Don't dismiss them. That's what you get to do. And if that's where your goal is, again, let me know. I'll give you more on how we got there. Sorry, I'm getting on some sidetrack, but that's how much I enjoyed that experience. I'm not saying I necessarily want to homeschool my grandkids, though. I want them to go through that struggle. I want my kids to go through that struggle with theirs. But, again, that's the job that I look back at with the most fondness of everything. Now, for me, Neely Fuller Jr. passed away earlier this year in 2025. If I had to say that there was a man who I would have named a room after, if I had to name, and my school was not named after someone else, it was actually named after our last name. But if the second person that would have gotten credit for that, it would have been Neely Fuller Jr. Neely Fuller just totally transformed, and we studied him. We listened to him in the car. And so Neely Fuller Jr. had 9 areas of activity. I split my curriculum. I split days. I split months. I split everything following that paradigm of those 9 areas of activity. And actually, I will later on add one. But I have to give credit to where that came from. There's no way I'm going to take credit for that. Shout out to some people out there who do. But Neely Fuller said there are 9 areas of activity, called 9 areas of human activity, that all people are doing at all times, and they are controlled by, as he would call it, the white supremacists. And if you know Neely Fuller using that term, it's not used in the way that we use it in our vernacular today. A white supremacist, he's talking about a governmental system that we all live in, and in terms of who makes the decisions and runs the world. That's a topic for another day, because again, I don't want some of you getting your panties off in a bunch, getting distracted by that point. But I'm going to tell you, as you see here, we have the 9 areas of economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, counter war. So how did I design my homeschool, or how did I design my curriculum about that, or my days? It was focusing on each one of those areas. Sometimes I may focus on those for an entire month. Sometimes I would rotate it and do it something in the whatever we were studying each day. So for example, you could take something like even mathematics, and as you go through math, apply that math when it comes, really econ is, that's a major part of economics, and that's math. So whatever your math lesson is, now apply that to how money moves in this world. We get to education. Well, hello, homeschooling falls right into here. One of the names I've talked about, it wasn't just homeschooling. This is the University of Dad. Education is my responsibility for my family in my home. So yes, that is a major part of human activity. And as Neely Fuller pointed out, it's outsourcing given to other people. We don't even do it. We give it to someone else. And that's what I'm encouraging you not to do. But the fact is, how can we ever change the future society that all of us complain about, giving it to people that we don't trust, that we wonder, well, what's going on with the Epstein? The same government that's talking about with the Epstein files, the same government that's talking about this Kirk stuff. And it's like, does that even make any sense about what went on with the rifle? Does that even, all the things we fear, but yet again, we send our kids to be educated by these folks. Neely Fuller would say yes, because they run education. Now, what's great about these 9 areas, I'm giving you how Neely Fuller broke them down. We're going to use them as category labels. But even for you, again, Democrat, liberals, whatever you want to label yourself, everything you do falls under these areas as well. So if you pissed about Charlie Kirk and all those who support him, then think about it. You are bickering every single day, probably online, over these 9 areas right here. So, what are you doing about teaching your children about it? We get to entertainment. How does entertainment impact us? Me and the kids talked about it. I gave you that example of Good Times and Blackish because my kids knew my statement to them every day you're sitting here in front of the TV, we don't just watch TV, we critically analyze TV. We're not just passive consumers of the information. I remember, growing up watching the Dukes of Hazzard and the Confederate flag, but not being taught about it. I remember watching shows on the 80s and not seeing any presence, any black presence on such shows as the Dukes of Hazzard, or if there was a black dude on there, he might have been the criminal, or things like that. To see Good Times and the Jeffersons, what's happening has such an impact on me because of the black representation. But all of that was still shaping on how I would end up viewing myself as I got older. Certainly in labor, teaching my kids about labor. What's going to pay off? What are the things that you need to be working towards? But where do you expend your labor, and to who will you expend that labor for? Who do you labor for? That's something that we needed to discuss. And we looked at labor. We looked at blue collar versus white collar. Again, there's so many ways that you can overlay this depending on the age of your child. And you even can bring in your family history here on what your father did, your grandfather did, etc. We broke down things. This actually ties into economics. When we went, goodness, we even did an analysis of the homes that they grew up in and compared that to some other homes in the area that we used to live in. That touched on economics. That also touched on labor. That also touched on law. That also touched on politics. Because what we found was that the one little shack that we lived in the suburbs was worth twice as much as the much larger home that two of my children were born into. Well, why is that? And we broke that down. And that goes into law. Where we grew up, some of these segregation laws. I had so many books on the legal system. And turns out, at the time, two of my daughters wanted to move into the legal system. That was something that they started wanting to get into, whether it was criminal justice. And I would encourage one to always become a lawyer because she loved to debate. And the way she expressed herself was just always so incredible and amazing. And so, but how do the laws impact the shape of your family? Here's one that I'm going to touch on for, again, homeschooling parent. Think about your laws, even in your ability to homeschool. When I made the decision to move into the state that I moved to, one of the things that I did? I actually looked, and most of you will be like, well, we're going to move where the great school system is, or where we're going to move because of this, and we're going to move. I looked at the map on the Homeschool Legal Defense Association map, and I said, where can I homeschool without any government interference? I originally wanted to move to Colorado first. And when I was real yay big, I wanted to move to California. Homeschooling in California, you got to be kidding me. No way, no desire. But anyway, that was why certain states immediately cut off. Some of you 2A guys listening to this, you would be the same way. If you found out some 2A stuff was going to, let's say, not be favored, you wouldn't move to that state. Well, I was the same way. If there was a state that was not going to allow me to teach my children, because to me, that was the linchpin article, or excuse me, the linchpin issue. For some of you, you love some Charlie Kirk because you said maybe a child being, can we even say the word? We don't want to talk about 1A, First Amendment rights. The very platform that I'm on, they would limit this video even if I say certain words. But see, that gets over our head because we don't want to think about that. Again, we just banging a keyboard, I hate you. I can't even say that word because this video might be pulled down. The algorithm won't favor it if I talk about, let's just say, the birth of an infant. And many of you will complain about that. But yet at the same time, that's your linchpin issue. And some of you ladies, you well beyond childbearing years. Some of you guys, you aren't going to have any children. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be an important topic because that's human life. Don't get me wrong. But you know what? But the point is, you don't have any control over it. You know who you do have control over it? You got control over little Johnny. You got control over little Sarah in your house. So I'm just asking you, well, why are you all, again, mad and you ready to fight somebody online and you follow whatever leader of the month is put out in front of us, but yet you don't have much control over the very children that are under your care? And again, for you evangelicals, those are the children that, wouldn't you say God did give you? So shouldn't that be your first primary order? Just wondering. Well, let me pull back off of that. And that leads into politics, the debates about politics. You know, again, I'm politically agnostic, and I taught my children to be that way as well because we studied all of the presidents and all the flim flam bamboozle, wish bambooms that got pulled on certainly people that look like me and on how they could not depend on any politician to be their savior. We get to religion. When we look at religion, that's great because we looked at a lot of religions. I have an apologetics background, so I enjoyed that aspect of it. Religion was a major part of our home. And many people said, well, there's a nice Christian school that you can send your kids to. But I always said, that's only part of it. I'm not sending my kids just because I want them to go to a Christian school. Heck, I went to one for 4 years. And looking back at it, I kind of wish I wouldn't. I'm thankful for my parents, my dad for working and paying for me to send me there, and my brother and sister as well. But don't get it twisted. In terms of an education that I got, in terms of a lot of the kids that I went to school with, and I later could look at their Facebook page now, I'm like, these folks probably didn't like me. Or they like me because, Devin, you're different. Or better yet, let's talk about the teachers that had me reading Huckleberry Finn and Mark Twain with N. Jim. Because we got freedom of speech, but I better not say that word. And I don't have a problem saying the word. Trust me. And not that I say it in the way that your favorite hip hop rapper uses it. I say it because it's just so amazing that now this word is so offensive when people have been using it against us for centuries. And if black people find it so offensive, then why do we say it to one another? Or why do y'all say it to one another? Because I know how it felt to be in a classroom and have my English teacher basically look at me and a couple of other black girls, because I was the only black dude really in my class most years, and have that teacher say, well, I'm sorry, this word is going to be very offensive, but I'm going to assume the government gave her a list of books that she had to go ahead and read for her class. And it was the government that made the decision to say that those books, and I'm sure they've probably been amended and changed now, but that those books were, read them in class. That's good. That's good literature. Let me tell you, I don't think my life has been enriched not one bit reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer. Sorry. Sorry for you literary people out there. No, it was not, has not been. But it did change my life. And you know what I think changed my kids' life? Reading the Neely Fuller has such a long book, but the compensatory counter-racist code guide that he created. Let me go into sex and let me go into war, counter war. Obviously, the sex thing comes up, and I'm just going to say this. A lot of you, again, you big Charlie Kirk fans because of stuff that he says about sex and, who should be doing what. And Okay. What do you think your kids are learning in school, though? Again, I'm talking to you, MAGA Republican crowd. What do you think your kids are learning in school? If you got such a problem with it, but you turn around and send them to school, then again, I think this is an area that you should be taking over, and you should be a big proponent to homeschooling so you could put your values in there. Conversely, again, if those of you who ascribe to be liberal or Democrats, or maybe let me pull back on that. I'm going to even talk to a lot of you black Democrat evangelicals. Because certainly when it comes to probably sex, you probably agree with a lot of Charlie Kirk's positions. But see, you can't, because you got to be one or you got to be the other. The good part about being a homeschool parent, I taught both sides. I don't have to have a political party persuasion to it. I can teach both sides. Can you? Here's the reason why you might want to homeschool. Lastly, let's look at war, counter war. Oh, how great it was to be able to teach my kids about the real history behind Pearl Harbor. How when we talk about 9/11, Lucy, you got some explaining to do, because that just doesn't make an iota of sense. Didn't realize it in 2001. Can look back at it now and be like, as my grandmother used to say, just because you say it doesn't make it so. Just because you show it to me on TV doesn't make it so. So we were able to start analyzing even some of the things. I used to tell the kids all the time, even if they wanted to go into the military, you're going to have to go fight that war on terror. And here's how it's going to go. Here's how the recruiters are going to approach you, et cetera. Again, definitely knowing what my family has contributed to this country and fighting for this country. But the point was, my kids were not going to be under any illusion that going to fight for this system, that they were going to come home and be a hero. Because all this thank you for your service stuff just started recently after 9/11. My grandfather, we would go down on the farm, down to Bob Evans. And he was a World War II veteran, fought in Okinawa, I think Morocco, and I can't remember the other place he was stationed at. But my grandfather in his 30s was in World War II. We used to go out to dinner. People weren't paying for his meal, and folks weren't walking up saying thank you for your service. Then that's been that's some political indoctrination going on. And we were able to talk about that on why that's being done. It's not being done because they just want to pat the people that have given their lives or have served and fought for this country. It's part of another indoctrination that we ended up looking at privacy, et cetera, on, we'll just say, justification for war, non-war. Anyway, those are the great things that I was able to teach my kids when it came to homeschooling, because that's what I had the ability to do. What about you? Well, again, whatever positions you agree with Charlie Kirk on, or whatever positions you disagree with Charlie Kirk on, the question is, what are you able to put into your own children? Or again, it's Monday. Do you send your kids to the same school system that you hate and you are mad at the other side for controlling? Okay, let's talk about some of the struggles that a lot of you are going to have with homeschooling. And it's going to be, well, my kids will miss something. I know you're worried. You're worried that my kids are going to not get fill in the blank. Let's go look at Dexter Manley. Let's look at some athletes, especially of yesteryear, that made it all throughout the education system because they could play a sport, and they ended up graduating functionally illiterate, as they used to say. Let's just say that not everybody gets everything in the school system. But again, you've been indoctrinated to think that your kids are going to get it all in there. What your kids desire is your presence. Dad, let me repeat that one more time. Dad, your kid does not require perfection. Your kids require your presence. I'm going to do a Umar Johnson here for one moment. Dads, your kids do not require perfection. They require your presence. I could go down the road on this, being how you divorced dads might be lacking your kids' presence because you weren't perfect. But at the same time, I think just as with a lot of other things, kids don't get it until later on in life. We're in our 20s and teens, 20s. Until you've been through some things, that's when your parents appear to be a whole lot wiser than you may have thought early on, until they have to start making sacrifices. But again, this is the only investment that pays off. Your job does not care about you. Ask me how I know. All the work that you're doing for someone else is not going to matter. It's what you're doing for that family. It's what you're doing for your kids. So don't worry about them missing something. You're not going to be perfect, and you're going to have to learn as you go. But isn't that what the school system does? I remember having schools where we didn't have a teacher for months at a time because one went off on pregnancy leave. And especially in the private schools, they probably weren't paying that much money. So we just got a series of substitutes. You're going to tell me we got what we were supposed to get? When my daughter went to community college, there was a ton of issues with the professor that just kind of disappeared. And then they trying to figure out how to find someone else. She's missing stuff every one of those weeks. Heck, we can even talk about what they miss now doing online schooling versus being in a classroom. Everyone is going to miss regardless of the environment that they're in. Do you think if your kids are on lockdown at some school today, or they're going to be tomorrow, or they will be next week, do you think they're learning that day? Do you think they're missing something that day? I got a feeling that they are. And so, yes, you don't have to be perfect. You probably have this idea of perfection that you think exists in the school system, but it's not there. Because if it is there, then our schools wouldn't be in the position and the shape that they are in. So they aren't perfect. So why do you have an idea of perfection that you are supposed to have? Your presence is what counts. You're probably wondering, well, what do I do about their socialization? Oh, man, this one. Oh, my goodness. Oh, yeah. I'm going to try not to talk an hour on this. I'm just going to say, if we're so worried about socialization, here's what I want you to do. When was the last time you went to your class reunion? I've talked to a lot of people over the years, as I've now been out of school for going on 40 years out of high school. It is hilarious to me the number of people that I come across that don't go to their class reunions. And what do they say? I didn't like those people when I was in school with them. I definitely don't want to go back and see them now. Well, what about all that good socialization that you parents are so worried your kids are going to miss out on? What about if and see, this is something we didn't talk about back in the day, but we do talk about now. If your socialization is so good, then why in the world are your kids probably all on some kind of anti-anxiety medications? If your socialization is so good, why is your kid probably the terror in the classroom? Maybe your kid needs to stop socializing so they can let some of the other kids learn. This whole idea of socialization cracks me up because you know what? If you want your kids to socialize more, take this away from them. Let's go there. Let's go there. If you want to get your kids to socialize more, let's pull their phones. You G's out there know if you out there in the dating game right now, it used to be that thing where you walk up to a girl, you got your pen, you go, hey girl, can I get your number? Now who can walk up to a girl because they all, and she got this look on her face like, don't even think about walking up talking to me. I'm sitting, don't you see I'm about to post this doggone Instagram photo right here, and I can get far more attention like this than you walking up. I don't care if you Prince Charming or not. No, so miss me on the whole socialization thing. But I know, many of you still are just so concerned about that. Then my question for you is for all of you who are working from home, what about your socialization? I assume you have friends, right? So who's to say your kids can't have friends? See, people will be like, well, I knew some homeschool couple, I knew people, some parents who homeschool, and their kids just seem not be socialized pretty well. Well, probably what I've often found, and this is what my main influence, shout out to Alex. Alex, you know who you are. That when I was working with figure skaters and I looked at her demeanor, and I remember going home telling my then wife, I think I want to homeschool because I saw how she acted. And then I started looking at how some of the other skaters that I work with acted. And I'm like, I noticed a difference in these kids. So if you mean to tell me that the lack of socialization actually made these kids better behave, where do I sign up? Because I'm signing up for that one all day, every day. Please let me sign up for that. Because if that means my kids aren't acting the way some of you other kids are acting, you parents know what I'm talking about. The ones where you spend more time telling your kid to sit down in church. You know the socialization that your kid gets because you don't want to take them to a restaurant and they stinking 8, 10, 12, 14 years old. You know the socialization that you still have to tell them how to greet somebody because the way when people talk to them is like, hey, how you doing, little Johnny? I have not seen you in a while. Wow, you've gotten so big. Thanks. How socialized are some of your kids that they probably saw on so many meds they might be feeling like zombies? I mean, look, this is the reality of the situation. Because a lot of parents, they got kids on anti-anxiety medications. They just kind of like, I'm here. I got to be calm. Well, is that what your socialization is getting you? Because at home, your child doesn't act like that. But when they go to school and they're around all those fun kids, oh, wait a minute. You mean socialization in our world of anti-bullying? We always talk about bullying now. We now have to have anti-bullying campaigns. Wow, I'm just trying to figure out where all this good. So we seem to think socialization is neither good or bad, but we seem to only think of good socialization. And again, I'm going to say, if it was so good, how come you don't go back to your class reunion? And you were around the days probably before these things were out, and yet you don't go because your socialization, your experience with those other kids wasn't all that great. So if that's what you're worried about, okay. But I'm going to say it's up to you to have friends. All of my kids played sports. All of my kids were involved in extracurricular activities, where it was the library, my youngest daughter volunteering at one of the food shelters, etc. Your kids can be tremendously involved in plenty of things, especially again nowadays. You can find out local events, happenings, etc. on the internet. There's no excuse for your kids to just be sitting in the house. But isn't it funny? Again, if you want to really work on your kids' socialization, shut that PS5 off. If you want to really work on socialization, shut that VR off. All this mess tells me is that you really don't care about socialization. And I know what I'm about to say is probably going to piss a lot of you off. The only socialization you really care about is your own. Because a lot of you parents won't homeschool because you like that time away for yourselves. Moms, I have to call you out because generally the moms would be the ones that are at home, the so-called stay-at-home moms. Oh, how I remember. My ex-wife would be talking to a bunch of mothers. We'd be at the church talking to a bunch of moms. And those moms, year after year after year, will be bragging about, here it is, late August or September. I can't wait for those kids to get back into school so they'll be gone all day and out of my hair. And, we used to say, well, it must be kind of nice. We don't really have that luxury because our kids are at the house all the time. And they were like trying to get their play dates planned and everything else. And I remember here in my school district, they ended up going out on strike some years ago. And it was kind of funny. The way that they ended up winning? Those teachers were like, cool, we don't go to work. All right, so y'all find something to do with these kids. Parents freaked out. They weren't freaking out because of their kids were missing out on an education. They were like, ain't no daycare. Where do I put what are we going to do with their kids? So the local recreation center was basically doing daycare for the parents. Now, why? Obviously, it's because if you got little ones, you have to go to work. That daycare aspect, free in many cases, is quite important. I get it, but again, let's not get it twisted. A lot of you, even if you can't afford it, you don't want the kids home because that's mommy's playtime. When we were kids, if you're a Gen Xer listening to this, those was the time for Ryan's Hope, All My Children, One Life to Live, and General Hospital on ABC. I don't know what was on NBC or CBS. I know one of those had Days of Our Lives, et cetera, et cetera. As the World Turns, I think was on CBS. Then we moved to the talk show era. That's why Oprah was on when she was on. And, we started having the talk shows. Many of the dads were at work. Moms were chilling at home until the kids got home watching that stuff on TV for the ones that didn't have to work. So let's keep it 100. Now, they still enjoy having that time for the ones that can't stay at home. So, I miss me on all the, well, you just don't know how hard it is. As I just was even having a conversation recently with my mom. The one thing that the career woman does look at, the stay-at-home mom, she says, well, yeah, you get to stay at home and you do get to clean or cook or whatever you're doing, but I still have that expectation and provide and go work a 40-hour-a-week job and still do that. Dads, now you see the pressure that you have on you and why, taking some of that burden off, especially when it comes to schooling the kids, will help out tremendously because she may already have a lot on her plate. My point is, that's part of that socialization, Dad, that you can even take care of. There were years that, football was all on me. Trips to the library, all on me. All activities, all on me because I had to drive the kids there. For reasons in the family, that was all on me for years. Oh, do you think I got time off of work to do those things? No. Do you think the projects waited? No. Do you think only thing that took me out of that responsibility was a trip? If I had to go out of town for a work trip, then the kids just really couldn't go do those activities. But otherwise, tired or not, I had to do it. You may have to do it as well. But that's part of having your kids around other people. And it can be done. It can be done. Next is that fear of criticism. And this is a big one that ties into the socialization as well. A lot of you parents are really scared to be criticized by other people. You have fear that other people are going to look at you. Other parents are going to say, well, I could never do that. My response always was, I didn't ask you if you could. There are things I didn't ask you for. I didn't ask you for one dime. I didn't ask you to teach my children. And I didn't ask for your opinion. Well, 3 strikes, you out. Shut up. I didn't play that. I don't play it to this day. It's like when people even maybe give you some advice on your divorce. Did I ask you a question? If I didn't ask for your advice and your counsel, then shut up. And sometimes that's how we have to be at folks. But as a leader, that's the call that you actually have to make. Sometimes people are trying to steer where you should be. People are trying to tell you where you should be steering your family ship because they can't handle the waters that you're going into. They can't handle the depth that you're going into. So they tell you, hey, I just feel much better staying in shallow water. I'm more comfortable there. And then good for you. but I didn't ask for your opinion. And I'm telling you that I know that's a hindrance for a lot of you. A lot of you in the back of your minds, you're even thinking, what would I say? What's my mom going to say? What's my dad going to say? What are my coworkers going to say? Am I going to look crazy? But what's funny is that I found that a lot of people open up to the idea of homeschooling when they are forced to. I've heard so many children that once they are going through, again, bullying in school, a lot of anxiety, then the parents want to bring them home, but they weren't prepared. I hope something in this video begins to prepare you for that. And again, let me know, like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below if you want me, and I am going to plan in going into more ways that you can get this done. Where we talk about designing a curriculum, we talk about how to put things together, we talk about learning your kids. Let your kids' talent, skills, and abilities drive the subjects beyond the old reading, writing, arithmetic. Let your kids' abilities then drive the subject matters coming up. But also, as the leader dad of your home, you design the curriculum you want your kids to have, not a government school system. But part of even feeling comfortable being in that leadership role is being able to tell people to mind their own business. A lot of folks may be jealous of you. A lot of folks may be jealous of your flexibility. I'm going to tell you, we keep it real here on Iron Father. You may be jealous of a lot of folks as well. I remember working with someone before, and he would always talk about, me and my wife going to get some sexy time in while the kids are in school, and I'm going to take a work from home day, and we're going to hang out, and we're going to have some sexy time. That is kind of how he said it too. But what was funny is the fact that, as a homeschooling parent, you don't get that in sexy time. You're not getting a cleared out house. You're not having an opportunity to just go ahead and think you better let it go. Let it go. Nah, ain't gonna be no love TKO going on in your house. Because those kids are there and it's in the middle of the morning, afternoon, and they all running around, and disappearing gets kind of difficult. Yeah, 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 yeah. But you guys know, that's just part of it. There are sacrifices. There are some pros and cons to anything in life, positives and negatives. And sometimes having that time alone as a couple is definitely one of them. But this is where, for those of you dads, and this is going to have to be a whole separate video of how this can be done, how you as a dad can homeschool if you're the only parent. It can be done. I'm going to tell you how in upcoming videos. But, that's not really an issue for you then. It's just a matter of now people believing and trusting that you can do it. But you have to have the confidence to do so. All right, so let's go ahead and begin to wrap this up. Let me know what you want to cover in some other videos. I would like to go over some things such as a vision, how you can develop a vision for your homeschool. I would like to go over how you choose that core curriculum that you want for your kids. Let's talk about some activities that you can do, some visits that you can actually make out to places that kind of rejuvenate you and fire you up, but also things to keep your kids socialized. And lastly, let's move into some of the things that I talked about before, how you can run some trials, how you can start out with just starting out with your kids, looking, analyzing, and really diving into the current work that's given to them by their traditional school. And then you may begin to move to a hybrid route where you start filling in the gaps, filling in those days that they are not in school. You now start teaching your own curriculum to them, maybe even something totally separate than what they're learning, but also complementary, because you're giving them more presence. And then lastly, we can end up looking at that full homeschooling part where you just like, boop, I'm jumping all in. Again, a lot depends on the age of your children. So it's hard to give a one size fits all kind of speech here, presentation for what we're talking about now. But I at least want to get your mind thinking. Let's stop making a whole bunch of noise. It's funny. I think a lot of people were praising the Lord on Sunday. And yet Monday came along and they outsourced all that education and praise back to the school system. I think a lot of folks said, if you hate, I'm going to say this really, if you hate, Charlie Kirk, but the question is, do you agree with his critique on this system? If you love Charlie Kirk, do you agree with his critique on the system? Well, if you do, if that's one thing that y'all have in common, then another thing I want you two camps to have in common, begin to think about how you can educate your own children. Missing noise and all the conflict and everything, again, it isn't missing nurture. Your kids miss your nurture. Again, dad, your kids don't want perfection. They want presence. You may be at a point in your life like me where you think maybe they do want perfection. Maybe. But you know, as a mature man, that what they're going to appreciate in the end is going to be your presence. So let's go ahead and close this out. I don't know where any of you are at. Again, I'm just going to say it's not about somebody being touted up. I don't care whether it's Candace Owens. I don't care whether it's Nick Fuentes. I don't care whether it's Charlie, Kirk. I don't care who your latest guru is and whoever's on the whatever liberal side. I don't care if it's Van Jones. I don't know. I don't even know half of these folks. But what's funny is I do know that they can all get us riled up. My motto in my home was, I don't care what's going on in the White House. I care what's going on in my house. I don't care what's going on in the White House. I care what's going on in my house. Please begin to adopt that, because every single election cycle, that's all we fight about. But what's going on in your home? Dads, what kind of leadership are you presenting in your own home? A lot of you, you're outsourcing your leadership to the local school. You outsource your leadership to the local coach. A lot of you moms, you're outsourcing fatherhood to the local coach. Then you wonder why your kids getting their balls juggled. A lot of you are just outsourcing your leadership to the local church. You outsourcing your leadership to the local pastor. You outsourcing your leadership to the local guru. But what about you? Why did God or the great Mother Earth or the universe give those kids to you? It was for you to lead them, not for somebody else. All right. I'm not on the soapbox. Believe me, I'm not. Made plenty of mistakes. I understand. I know, like I said, I know I'm not perfect. But all I do know is that if I died now, that company that I worked for 18 years, it probably won't be one person that comes to my funeral. Well, I'll take that back. Maybe one. That's only because she lives not too far from me. But that's if she heard about it. But there won't be anyone that I work with coming to my funeral. No one is going to put down all of my accolades and my whole bio and all the interviews that I've done and the press, whatever's. Nope. Nobody's going to come and at my eulogy going to read, and then he actually did an analysis and actually in forecasting he did something. Nope. What I hope is that people get up there and say, man, I remember seeing this dude, man, every time we walked into his house, man, he had us come in. My cousins can come in. Some of my friends can come in and say, yeah, I remember Dev, he asked me to speak in front of his kids. I remember that time I gave a presentation in front of his kids. I did a slideshow because of, the trip that I was on and what I was studying in Brazil. Or my other cousin that came by and I asked her to come over and do a presentation, really on conspiracies. And then whether it was even just relatively recently, I called this kind of my homeschooling continuing education. It was my brother doing we'll just say a self-defense course. All my kids out of the house, except for one at that time, doing a self-defense course. Because, this is for you two A brothers out there, you fight for your 2A rights, which I am a proponent of. So yes, that was something I was able to bring in, even though the kids are gone. Because until I die, everything that's in my head, I want it to go into theirs, which means I probably will, if the opportunity ever presents itself, even my grandkids won't be able to come around me without getting some kind of lessons, some schooling lessons. Won't be anything formal and organized, but there's a reason why I keep a lot of those books and I haven't thrown them out. What say you? Again, if this can help you, like and subscribe, pass it on to somebody that may be able to help. I know homeschooling is part of something that you dads may want to do. And it may be 3, it may be 30 of you guys that are saying, you know what? I get a chance to start over. I'm starting over with my kids. I'm divorced. I got a 9-year-old and 11-year-old or whatever. This may be something I'm interested in doing. Maybe I now look and see, I don't want my kids to look at me a certain way, or I want to be more involved in my kids' lives. Or maybe you're saying, I'm working on my marriage. I want to be more active and involved in my kids' life. This is a way that you do it. This is a great way that you can do it. Be that leader, be that iron father, or in some cases, you may be that iron mother. Either way it goes, like and subscribe for more. And if there's the only thing I can leave you with, again, it's not about perfection. It's all about your presence.